The silver dagger glinted in Alpha King Darius Blackthorn's hand as he raised it toward the harvest moon, and every wolf in the clearing knew someone was about to lose everything. Tonight, his voice boomed across the sacred grounds, we sever the bonds that no longer serve our pack. The annual rejection ceremony had begun, and the metallic scent of fear mixed with anticipation hung heavy in the air. Darius's dark eyes swept over the gathered wolves, but his expression remained as cold as winter stone. That's when it hit him. A scent so intoxicating, so perfectly crafted for his senses, that his knees nearly buckled. Vanilla and wild jasmine, with an undertone of something fierce and untamed that made his wolf, Fenris, claw frantically at his consciousness for the first time in 3 years. Mate. The word exploded through his mind like thunder. Darius's head snapped up, nostrils flaring as he searched the crowd. His gaze locked on a figure standing apart from the others, chin raised defiantly despite the hostile stares surrounding her. Arya Moonwhisper. The broken Omega he'd publicly rejected 3 years ago. Except she wasn't broken anymore. Gone was the trembling girl who couldn't hold her wolf form for more than minutes at a time. The woman before him stood with the poise of a born leader, her silver hair cascading down her back like moonlight on water. Her violet eyes met his across the clearing, and something dangerous flickered in their depths. Impossible, Darius breathed, but Fenris was already pushing forward, demanding he claim what was theirs. Arya stepped forward, her voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. I'm here to complete what you started, Your Majesty. She spoke his title like a curse. 3 years ago, you declared me unworthy. Tonight, I accept that rejection. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Everyone remembered that night, how the young Alpha King had stood before his pack and announced that Arya Moonwhisper, despite being his fated mate, was too weak to stand beside him as Luna Queen. Her wolf is fractured, he'd declared then. She shifts like a pup, loses control, can't maintain form. I cannot bind myself to weakness. Now, as her scent wrapped around him like silken chains, Darius realized he'd been catastrophically wrong. Arya walked toward him with fluid grace, each step purposeful and controlled. The crowd parted before her, some bowing their heads in what looked disturbingly like respect rather than pity. Arya. Her name left his lips like a prayer he'd forgotten how to say. It's Luna Moonwhisper now, she corrected coolly. I've found my place elsewhere. The formal rejection ritual required them to stand face to face, to speak the ancient words that would sever their mate bond forever. But as Darius looked down at her, when had she grown so tall? His wolf was practically howling with need. She was magnificent. Begin the words, she commanded, and several pack members shifted uncomfortably at her tone. No one spoke to their Alpha King that way. Darius started, then stopped. The rejection words felt like acid on his tongue. Arya, wait. No. Her violet eyes blazed. You made your choice. You stood before our pack and declared me broken, defective, unworthy. You chose your precious reputation over your mate. She stepped closer, and her scent grew stronger, making him dizzy with want. So speak the words, Darius, and set us both free. Fenris was clawing at his mind, begging him to reach for her, to claim her, to fix the massive mistake he'd made. But the damage was done. The pain in her eyes, carefully hidden beneath layers of newfound strength, told him everything he needed to know. I, Darius Blackthorn, Alpha King of the Crimson Moon Pack. He forced the words out like they were killing him. Reject you, Arya Moonwhisper, as my mate and Luna Queen. She didn't even flinch. And I, Arya Moonwhisper, accept your rejection. Her voice grew stronger, more confident. I reject you, Darius Blackthorn, as my mate and Alpha King. The mate bond should have snapped like a broken chain. Instead, it pulled tighter, burning through both of them with unexpected intensity. Darius gasped, staggering back a step, while Arya's eyes widened in surprise. That's not possible, Elder Marcus whispered from the crowd. The ritual should have severed the connection. Arya recovered first, her expression shuddering closed again. It doesn't matter. The words are spoken. I'm leaving with the dawn. Leaving? Darius found his voice. Where? She smiled then, and it was sharp as winter wind. Somewhere I'm appreciated for what I am, not punished for what I'm not. As she turned to walk away, moonlight caught something on her shoulder, a mark partially hidden by her hair. Darius's blood turned to ice as he recognized the symbol. A crescent moon wrapped in thorny vines. The mark of the Shadow Moon Pack. His greatest enemies. Arya. The word came out as a growl, his alpha command bleeding through. She paused but didn't turn around. You bear their mark, he said, loud enough for the entire gathering to hear. Gasps echoed through the crowd as others spotted what he'd seen. Now she did turn, and her smile was all predator. I told you, Darius. I found my place elsewhere. Her voice carried a new power, something that made even his strongest warriors step back. Alpha Cain was very interested in my unique abilities. Cain Darkwood. Leader of the Shadow Moon Pack and the one wolf who'd sworn to destroy everything Darius held dear. You're not seeking refuge, Darius realized, his voice deadly quiet. You're working with them. Arya's laugh was like silver bells and broken glass. Working with them? Oh, Darius. She took a step toward him, and this time it was he who wanted to retreat from the power radiating off her small frame. I'm not working with them. She paused, letting the silence stretch until it snapped with tension. I'm leading them. The clearing erupted in chaos. Warriors shifted to wolf form, snarls and howls filling the night air. But Arya stood calm in the center of it all, her violet eyes never leaving Darius's face. You want to know what I've been doing these past 3 years, she called over the noise. While you were playing politics with your perfect, submissive she-wolves, I was learning exactly what kind of power runs through my veins. Lightning cracked overhead, though there hadn't been a cloud in the sky moments before. The scent of ozone mixed with her intoxicating fragrance, and Darius felt something primal and terrifying stir in his chest. Not fear of her. Fear of losing her. The Shadow Moon Pack didn't take me in out of kindness, Arya continued, her voice now carrying an otherworldly resonance that made every wolf present want to bow their heads. They took me in because they recognized what you were too blind to see. What are you? Elder Marcus whispered. Arya's smile widened, revealing canines that seemed sharper than they should be. I'm the storm you never saw coming, Marcus. The weapon forged by your precious Alpha King's cruelty. Her gaze found Darius again. I'm the mistake that's going to cost you everything. Wind whipped through the clearing, carrying her scent away from him just as she began to fade into the shadows at the tree line. But her voice reached him clearly, a promise wrapped in velvet threat. Thank you, Darius, for rejecting me 3 years ago. It taught me exactly who my real enemies are. And then she was gone, leaving only the echo of her words and the devastating realization that Darius Blackthorn, Alpha King of the most powerful pack in the territory, had just lost the only thing that truly mattered. His mate was alive, magnificent, and absolutely determined to destroy him. The hunt was about to begin. Wanting to see what would happen next, subscribe to this channel to get to listen to more of our upcoming exciting stories. Click on the subscribe button now. Thank you. Chapter 2. Darius Blackthorn hadn't slept properly in 3 weeks. Every time he closed his eyes, vanilla and wild jasmine flooded his senses, and he'd wake with his heart pounding and Fenris clawing at his consciousness. His wolf was restless, demanding they track down their mate, but Darius had spent 21 days reminding himself that Arya Moonwhisper was no longer his concern. She was his enemy now. Your Majesty. Beta Marcus cleared his throat from the doorway of Darius's study. The council is waiting. Darius looked up from the stack of reports he'd been staring at for the past hour without reading a single word. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his usually immaculate appearance showed signs of strain. His black hair was disheveled, his jaw covered in stubble. Send them away, he muttered, turning back to the papers. Darius. Marcus stepped into the room, his voice taking on the familiar tone of a friend rather than a subordinate. This has to stop. The Riverside Pack attacked 2 of our border patrols yesterday. The Mountain Ridge Pack is demanding tribute for safe passage through their territory. And the Coastal Pack. He paused. They've officially withdrawn from our alliance. Let them. Darius's voice was flat, emotionless. We don't need weak allies. We need something. Marcus slammed his hand on the desk, causing several pack members passing in the hallway to freeze. The entire territory knows something's wrong with you. Word is spreading that the Alpha King is compromised, distracted. Every pack with an ounce of ambition is testing our borders. Darius finally looked up, his dark eyes flashing with dangerous heat. Are you questioning my leadership, Marcus? I'm questioning your sanity, Marcus shot back, then immediately tensed as Darius's alpha power pressed against him. But he didn't back down. 3 weeks ago, you were the strongest leader in the Western Territories. Now you can barely focus long enough to sign a treaty. Because 3 weeks ago, Darius thought bitterly, he hadn't known what it felt like to lose his mate twice. A sharp knock interrupted his brooding. Enter, he called. Gamma Luke burst through the door, his face flushed with exertion. Your Majesty, urgent message from the Southern Border Pack. Alpha Thomas requests immediate assistance with a rogue situation, and he's offering a formal alliance in exchange. Darius straightened. The Southern Border Pack controlled crucial trade routes and had remained neutral in most territorial disputes. An alliance with them would more than compensate for recent losses. When and where, he asked. Tonight, at the old stone bridge. He says the rogues have been using it as a crossing point to attack his territory. Marcus frowned. That's awfully convenient timing. And why wouldn't he handle rogues himself? Because, Darius stood, feeling more focused than he had in weeks, he's testing our strength. If we help him decisively, he'll know we're still the power to back. If we refuse or fail. He shrugged. He'll look elsewhere for protection. Or it's a trap, Marcus muttered. Darius was already moving toward his weapons cabinet. Then we'll spring it carefully. 3 hours later, Darius crouched in the shadows near the old stone bridge with a small strike force of his best warriors. The moon was nearly full, casting silver light across the rushing water below. Everything felt wrong. The forest was too quiet. No night birds, no rustling of small creatures. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. I don't like this, whispered Garrett, his head tracker. The scent trails are all wrong. There's wolf here, but not rogue. Too organized. Darius was about to respond when Alpha Thomas emerged from the tree line on the opposite side of the bridge. He was a large man, even for an alpha, with graying hair and shrewd eyes. But something in his posture set Darius's teeth on edge. Alpha King, Thomas called across the water. Thank you for coming. Where are these rogues? Darius replied, his hand resting on the silver knife at his hip. Thomas smiled, and it wasn't pleasant. Closer than you think. The attack came from 3 sides at once. Wolves poured from the forest, but these weren't rogues. They moved with military precision, cutting off every escape route. Darius recognized the coordination immediately, Shadow Moon Pack tactics. Ambush, he roared, shifting to his massive black wolf form even as silver nets flew through the air. The next few minutes were chaos. His warriors fought valiantly, but they were outnumbered 3-1 and had walked directly into a trap. Darius took down 4 wolves before a net weighted with silver caught him, the metal burning through his fur and sending agony shooting through his nervous system. As he collapsed, forced back to human form by the pain, he saw his warriors falling around him. Not killed, captured. This wasn't a random attack. Someone wanted them alive. Well. A familiar voice cut through his pain-hazed vision. The mighty Alpha King, caught like a common rabbit. Kane Darkwood stepped into the moonlight, his pale hair gleaming and his cold blue eyes filled with satisfaction. The Alpha of the Shadow Moon Pack was everything Darius wasn't, tall where Darius was broad, elegant where Darius was powerful, calculating where Darius was passionate. Kane. Darius forced the name out through gritted teeth. I should have known. Oh, you should have known many things, Cain replied smoothly. He gestured, and several of his wolves hauled Darius to his feet, the silver net still wrapped around him. You should have known that rejecting a mate publicly would have consequences. You should have known that your enemies would eventually find your weakness. His smile widened. And you definitely should have known that Arya Moonwhisper is far more dangerous than you ever imagined. At the mention of her name, Darius's head snapped up. Where is she? Close, Cain said. Very close. In fact, she designed this entire operation. He began walking toward the forest, his wolves dragging Darius and his captured pack behind him. Did you know she has a gift for strategy? Among other talents you were too blind to notice. They traveled for what felt like hours through increasingly dense forest until they reached a clearing dominated by a massive stone altar covered in ancient carvings. Dozens of shadow moon wolves formed a circle around the space, their eyes glowing in the darkness. But Darius only had eyes for the figure standing beside the altar. Arya looked like moonlight given form. Her silver hair flowed loose around her shoulders, and she wore a flowing white dress that seemed to shimmer with its own light. But it was her eyes that stopped his breath. They glowed with an inner fire that had nothing to do with her wolf. Hello, Darius, she said, her voice carrying easily across the clearing. Thank you for coming. This was your plan? He asked, trying to ignore how his heart raced at the sight of her. From the beginning. She walked toward him with that same fluid grace he remembered from the rejection ceremony. Alpha Thomas owed Cain a favor. The rogue attacks on his territory weren't real, they were tests, making sure you'd respond to a request for help. She stopped just out of reach, close enough that her scent made Fenris whine with longing. You always were predictable when it came to protecting your allies. What do you want? The silver net was burning deeper into his skin, but he refused to show weakness. Arya tilted her head, studying him like he was a particularly interesting puzzle. Revenge would be the obvious answer. 3 years of humiliation, exile, having to rebuild myself from nothing because you decided I wasn't worthy. Her voice grew colder. But revenge is small. Temporary. She turned and walked back toward the altar, her fingers trailing over the ancient symbols carved into the stone. Do you know what this is, Darius? He'd seen similar altars in the oldest pack histories, but never one so perfectly preserved. A bonding stone. From the time of the first packs. Very good. Arya's smile was sharp. But not just any bonding stone. This particular altar was used for the most sacred of ceremonies, the awakening of Luna wolves. Darius's blood turned to ice. Luna wolves were legend, myth, stories told to pups about the ancient powers that once ruled all shifters. They were said to be able to control other wolves' transformations, to command loyalty through supernatural means, to wield power that transcended normal pack hierarchies. Luna wolves don't exist, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Don't they? Arya placed both hands on the altar, and the carved symbols began to glow with soft silver light. Tell me, Darius, what did you think was wrong with my shifting abilities 3 years ago? The question caught him off guard. You couldn't maintain wolf form. You'd shift back and forth uncontrollably. Sometimes you'd shift other wolves around you without meaning to. Without meaning to, she repeated softly. But what if I had meant to? What if the reason I seemed broken was because I was trying to suppress abilities too powerful for a teenage girl to control? As she spoke, the glow from the altar grew stronger, and Darius felt something stirring in his chest. The mate bond, which had been a constant ache since the rejection ceremony, suddenly pulsed with new intensity. I spent 3 years learning control, Arya continued. Cain found texts, teachers, ancient knowledge about what I really am. She turned to face him, and her eyes were now glowing with the same silver light as the altar. I'm the first Luna wolf born in over 3 centuries, Darius. I can control every shifter within 100 miles. I can force transformations, prevent them, make wolves submit to my will without question. To prove her point, she looked at one of Cain's warriors. Shift, she commanded softly. The wolf immediately dropped to all fours, his bones cracking as he transformed without hesitation. She looked at another. Back to human. The transformation was instant, involuntary. Impressive, Darius managed, though his mouth had gone dry. But what does this have to do with me? Aria's laugh was like wind chimes in a storm. Oh, Darius. You still don't understand. She moved closer, and this time she reached out to trace a finger along his jaw. The simple touch sent electricity shooting through him. Luna wolf power isn't something I can just take. It has to be awakened through a specific ritual. A ritual that requires. She paused, her finger trailing down to rest over his heart. The willing participation of my true mate. Understanding hit him like a physical blow. The bond. That's why the rejection ceremony didn't work. Exactly. Her smile was triumphant. We can say the words, we can hate each other, we can spend years apart, but the mate bond itself? That's written in our very souls. And according to the ancient texts, a Luna wolf's power can only be fully awakened when that bond is willingly embraced. Darius stared at her, pieces falling into place with horrible clarity. You don't want revenge. You want me to accept the mate bond so you can use our connection to awaken your full power. And then I'll be strong enough to unite every pack under my rule, she finished. No more territorial wars. No more alpha posturing. No more wolves dying because leaders like you are too proud to see beyond your own egos. By enslaving them to your will. Aria's expression hardened. By bringing order to chaos. By being the leader this territory needs instead of the collection of petty kings it suffered under. She stepped back, her hand falling away from his chest. The ritual is simple. We renew our mate bond willingly, under the light of the full moon, with the ancient words spoken over this altar. Our combined power awakens my abilities fully, and I become what I was born to be. And if I refuse? Cain laughed from somewhere behind him. Then you die, your pack falls into chaos, and every wolf in the territory suffers while stronger packs divide up your territory. He moved into Darius's line of sight. But if you agree, you'll be mated to the most powerful Luna in history. Your pack will be under her protection, your bloodline will carry her power, and you'll help rule a unified territory. Darius looked between them, his mind racing. Aria's plan was brilliant in its simplicity. She'd found a way to turn his rejection of her into the key to ultimate power. Whether he agreed or refused, she won. There's one problem with your plan, he said finally. Aria raised an eyebrow. Oh. I may be your true mate, Darius said, meeting her glowing eyes steadily, but you're not mine anymore. The words hit her like a physical blow, and for just a moment, the glow in her eyes flickered. You chose power over love, he continued. You chose revenge over healing. You chose to become exactly the kind of leader you claim to despise, one who rules through fear and control rather than earning loyalty. Aria's hands clenched into fists. You destroyed me, Darius. You took everything I was and threw it away like garbage. No, he said quietly. I hurt you. I was wrong, and cruel, and I've regretted it every day since. But I didn't destroy you, Aria. You're standing here, stronger than ever, commanding armies and wielding power I can't even comprehend. He took a step toward her, the silver net burning deeper into his skin. You destroyed yourself when you decided that power mattered more than the person you used to be. For a long moment, they stared at each other across the space between them. Darius could see the conflict in her eyes, the girl he'd once known warring with the weapon she'd become. Then Cain stepped forward, his voice cutting through the tension. Enough talk. Aria, kill him or use him, but end this. Aria turned toward Cain, and Darius saw something shift in her expression. Kill him? If he won't cooperate willingly, his death will still serve our purposes, Cain said dismissively. It will throw the Crimson Moon pack into chaos, and we can absorb the pieces. That wasn't the plan, Aria said slowly. Cain shrugged. Plans change. Power is what matters. Darius watched understanding dawn in Arya's eyes. Cain didn't care about her vision of a unified territory. He didn't care about preventing wars or protecting wolves. He cared about power, and he'd been using her abilities to get it. "How long?" she asked, her voice deadly quiet. "How long what?" Cain was smiling, but it didn't reach his eyes. "How long have you been planning to use me the same way Darius did?" The clearing went silent except for the crackling of the altar's silver light. Cain's mask finally slipped. "You're a weapon, Arya. A very powerful weapon. But weapons don't make policy decisions." Arya stared at him for a heartbeat. Then she laughed, a sound like breaking glass and distant thunder. "You're right," she said. "Weapons don't make policy decisions." The power that erupted from her was like nothing Darius had ever felt. Every wolf in the clearing, Shadow Moon and Crimson Moon alike, dropped to their knees as the force of her will press down on them. Even Cain stumbled backward, his eyes wide with shock. "But Luna wolves do," Arya finished, her voice echoing with supernatural authority. She turned to the nearest Shadow Moon warrior. "Release him," she commanded, nodding toward Darius. The wolf moved immediately, cutting through the silver net with trembling hands. Darius straightened slowly, his skin burning where the silver had touched, but his eyes never left Arya's face. "Why?" She was quiet for a long moment, her glowing eyes studying him with an expression he couldn't read. "Because," she said finally, "I need you alive." "For the ritual?" "No." Her smile was sharp as winter wind. "Because our mate bond is the key to awakening the ancient curse written into this altar. And once that curse is active, I won't just be able to control wolves within 100 miles. She placed her hands on the stone again, and the symbols flared brighter. "I'll be able to control every shifter in existence." Darius felt the blood drain from his face. "Arya. The girl you rejected 3 years ago wanted love and acceptance," she continued, her voice growing more distant, more dangerous. "But you cured me of those weaknesses." She looked at him one last time, and he saw nothing of the woman he'd once known in those glowing silver eyes. "Now I just want everything." The curse symbols on the altar began to pulse in rhythm with Darius's heartbeat, and he realized with growing horror that their mate bond, the connection he'd thought broken, was feeding power directly into the ancient magic. Arya had saved him, but not out of love or even lingering affection. She needed him alive because he was the final component in a spell that would make her the undisputed ruler of every shapeshifter on Earth. And there was absolutely nothing he could do to stop it. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. Chapter 3. Darius woke to the soft whisper of silk against his skin and the intoxicating scent of vanilla and wild jasmine flooding his senses. For a moment, he thought he was dreaming. Then the silver chains binding his wrists to the ornate headboard reminded him exactly where he was, and who had put him there. Arya's chambers. The room was a study in contradictions, much like its occupant. Ancient tapestries depicting wolf hunts hung beside modern weapons mounted on the walls. Candles flickered in silver sconces, casting dancing shadows across surfaces that held both delicate glass figurines and deadly silver blades. A massive four-poster bed dominated the space, its midnight blue curtains currently drawn back to reveal Darius chained within it. He should have been terrified. Should have been planning escape routes or calculating his chances of survival. Instead, for the first time in 3 weeks, he felt completely, vibrantly alive. The silver chains were loose enough that he could sit up, but tight enough to remind him of his captivity with every movement. The metal burned against his skin, but it was a distant discomfort compared to the fire in his blood. Having Arya this close, breathing in her scent with every breath, was both exquisite torture and the most perfect relief he'd ever known. Fenris was practically purring in his consciousness, finally at peace despite their circumstances. "You're awake." Arya's voice came from the shadows near the window, and Darius turned to see her silhouette outlined against the moonlight. She'd changed from the flowing white dress into something more practical, dark leather pants and a fitted tunic that emphasized her curves while allowing for easy movement. How long? His voice came out rougher than intended. 6 hours. She moved away from the window, and the candlelight caught the silver in her hair as she approached the bed. Long enough for me to read through the intelligence reports my scouts gathered from your pack's territory. Darius tested the chains experimentally. They held firm, but the silver wasn't pure enough to completely drain his strength. Arya had been careful, strong enough to hold him, but not so strong as to seriously injure him. The consideration should have been comforting. Instead, it made him wonder what exactly she needed him healthy for. Comfortable? She asked, settling into a chair she'd positioned just out of his reach. I've had better accommodations. He studied her face in the flickering light, searching for any trace of the girl he'd once known. Though I have to admit, your decorating skills have improved. Arya's lips curved in what might have been amusement. 3 years of independence will do that. Is that what you call this? Independence? I call it survival. Her expression hardened. Something you forced me to learn very quickly. They stared at each other across the small space between them, and Darius could feel the mate bond humming with tension. This close, he could see the faint shadows under her eyes, the slight tremor in her hands that she was trying to hide. She wasn't as unaffected by their proximity as she pretended to be. What do you want to know? He asked. Arya raised an eyebrow. Just like that? No demands for release? No threats about what your pack will do when they find you're missing? Darius shrugged, the movement making the chains clink softly. You're going to ask your questions whether I cooperate or not. And we both know that if you wanted me dead, I'd already be cold. He leaned back against the headboard, his dark eyes never leaving her face. Besides, I'm curious about what information the great Luna Wolf thinks she needs from a mere Alpha King. Something flickered in her expression at his casual use of her title. Your northern defenses, she said after a moment. How many warriors are stationed at the mountain passes? 43 as of last week. The truth came easily. His northern borders were well known to be his strongest, and sharing that information wouldn't compromise anything vital. Patrol schedules? Random. We learned long ago that predictable patterns make for easy ambushes. Arya nodded, making a note on a piece of parchment. What about the eastern territories? My scouts report unusual activity near the river crossing. You mean the silver mine excavation? Darius watched her carefully. That's not a military operation. We're expanding the mine to increase silver production for weapons and defensive measures. Her pen stilled on the paper. How much silver? Enough. He tilted his head, studying her reaction. Interesting that you're concerned about our silver reserves. Planning something that might require us to use a lot of weapons? Arya set down her pen and leaned back in her chair. You always were too observant for your own good. And you always were too intelligent to ask obvious questions. Darius tested the chains again, not to escape but to gauge her reaction. The real question is why you need intelligence about my pack's defenses when you could simply order every wolf in the territory to submit to your will. Luna Wolf abilities have limitations, she said carefully. Do they? Darius's voice dropped to a low rumble. Or are you planning something that requires more finesse than brute force? Before Arya could answer, a sharp knock echoed through the chamber. Enter, she called, and the door opened to admit a tall, lean man with dark hair and cold gray eyes. Darius recognized him immediately, Raven Nightshade, Kane's second-in-command and one of the most dangerous wolves in the Shadow Moon pack. Luna, Raven said, his gaze flicking between Arya and Darius with obvious disapproval. Kane requests your presence in the war room. Immediately. Arya stood smoothly. Tell him I'll be there shortly. He said immediately, Raven repeated, his tone carrying just enough challenge to make Darius's wolf bristle. I heard what he said. Arya's voice carried that supernatural authority that made even Raven take a step back. I said shortly. Raven's jaw tightened, but he nodded curtly. Of course, Luna. His eyes fixed on Darius. What should we do about the prisoner? He's my concern, Arya replied coolly. And mine alone. Cain might disagree with that assessment. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Are you questioning my judgment, Raven? I'm questioning your priorities, Raven said boldly. This Alpha King has been your obsession for 3 years. Some might say that obsession is compromising your objectivity. Darius watched the exchange with growing interest. There was clearly tension within the Shadow Moon pack about Arya's role, and her connection to him. Some might say a lot of things, Arya said, her voice deadly quiet. But they'd be wise to remember who holds the real power in this pack. Raven's hands clenched at his sides, but he backed down. My apologies, Luna. I'll inform Cain that you'll join us when you're finished here. After he left, Arya remained standing, her back to Darius as she stared at the closed door. Trouble in paradise? Darius asked. Nothing I can't handle. But her voice lacked its usual confidence. Raven's right about one thing, Darius said softly. I have been your obsession. Arya turned to face him, her expression unreadable. Don't flatter yourself. I'm not. Darius shifted position, the chains allowing him to lean forward slightly. You've spent 3 years planning my downfall. Building power, gathering allies, learning abilities that could make you the ruler of every shifter alive. But in the end, you still needed me here, in chains, in your bedroom. His voice dropped to a whisper. That's not strategy, Arya. That's obsession. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Darius pulled against the chains, not trying to break free but emphasizing his captivity. You could have killed me at the altar. You could have left me in a dungeon somewhere. Instead, you brought me to your private chambers and chained me to your bed. He paused, letting his gaze travel slowly over her face. Tell me that's not about more than extracting information. Arya's hands clenched into fists. You rejected me. Publicly. Cruelly. In front of every wolf who mattered in my life. Yes, Darius said simply. I did. You called me broken. Defective. Unworthy. Yes. You chose your reputation over your mate. Yes. His voice was steady, unflinching. I did all of those things. And I've regretted every single one of them every day since. Arya stared at him, clearly not expecting the simple admission. Regret doesn't undo the damage. No, Darius agreed. It doesn't. But it might explain why you're more conflicted about this revenge than you want to admit. I'm not conflicted. Aren't you? Darius leaned forward as far as the chains would allow. Then why am I still alive? Why haven't you completed whatever ritual requires our mate bond? Why are you sitting there asking me questions about troop movements when you could be out there conquering the world? Arya was quiet for a long moment, her violet eyes searching his face. You want to know why you're still alive? I'm dying to know. She moved closer to the bed, close enough that her scent made his head spin. Because 3 years ago, when you rejected me, you weren't wrong about everything. Darius frowned. What do you mean? I was hiding my abilities, she said softly. Suppressing them. Pretending to be weak because being strong would have gotten me killed. By who? Arya's laugh was bitter. Your father. The words hit Darius like a physical blow. What? King Alexander Blackthorn, she continued, her voice growing colder. The great Alpha King who united half the Western territories through strength and fear. Do you know what his favorite hobby was, Darius? Darius's mouth had gone dry. Tell me. Hunting Luna wolves. Arya sat on the edge of the bed, just within reach but somehow feeling impossibly distant. Your father believed that Luna wolves were abominations. Unnatural creatures who upset the natural order of pack hierarchies. So whenever he heard rumors of one, he'd track them down and kill them. That's not possible, Darius said, but his voice lacked conviction. His father had been many things, strong, ruthless, politically brilliant, but he'd also been paranoid about threats to his power. He killed 17 Luna wolves during his reign, Arya continued. Men, women, even children who showed signs of the gift. I learned to suppress my abilities because the alternative was death. Understanding crashed over Darius in waves. That's why you couldn't control your shifting. You were fighting your own nature every second of every day. And by the time your father died and you took the throne, the habit was so ingrained that I couldn't stop. Arya's voice grew soft, almost vulnerable. I spent 3 years trying to be the perfect, submissive Omega because I was terrified that if anyone saw what I really was, you'd finish what your father started. Darius stared at her, pieces of the puzzle finally clicking into place. The night I rejected you. I was going to tell you the truth, she whispered. I was going to show you what I really was, trust you with my life. Her laugh was broken glass. Instead, you stood before our entire pack and declared that I was too weak to stand beside you. The mate bond pulsed between them, carrying emotions too complex to name. Darius could feel her pain, her fear, her rage, but underneath it all was something else. Something that felt dangerously like the love they'd once shared. Arya, he said softly. I didn't know. Would it have mattered if you did? The question hung between them like a blade. Darius wanted to say yes, wanted to promise that he would have protected her, chosen her, loved her regardless of the risk. But they both knew the truth. 3 years ago, he'd been his father's son in every way that mattered. I don't know, he admitted. I was young, arrogant, more concerned with appearances than truth. I probably would have been terrified of what you represented. Arya nodded as if she'd expected that answer. At least you're honest. I'm trying to be. Darius pulled against the chains again, frustrated by the distance between them. But I'm not that man anymore, Arya. The past 3 years, losing you, it changed me. Did it? She stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Or are you just saying what you think I want to hear? I'm saying that if I could go back, if I could make a different choice, would choose you. Every time. No matter the cost. Arya's shoulders tensed. Pretty words. True words. She spun to face him, her eyes blazing. You want to know what the cost would have been? If you'd chosen me? If you'd stood by me when your pack discovered what I was? Tell me. Civil war, she said flatly. Half your pack would have rebelled rather than accept a Luna wolf as their queen. Other packs would have banded together to destroy us both. We would have spent our lives fighting just to survive. Then we would have fought. Spoken like a true alpha, Arya said bitterly. Always ready to solve problems with violence. Spoken like a man who loves his mate, Darius corrected. And would do anything to protect her. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with promise and impossibility. Arya stared at him, and for a moment, her carefully constructed walls seemed to crack. You don't love me, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. You love the idea of me. The challenge I represent. The power I could give you. I love the way you laugh when you think no one's listening, Darius said softly. I love how you used to hum while you worked in the gardens. I love that you're strong enough to survive everything that's been done to you and still find the courage to fight back. He paused. I love that you're sitting there trying to convince yourself that you hate me when we both know you feel the mate bond pulling just as hard as I do. Arya's breath caught. Darius. I can smell it on you, he continued, his voice dropping to a rumble. The way your scent changes when you're close to me. The way your heart races when I look at you. The way you positioned that chair just close enough that you could reach me if you wanted to. Stop. But she didn't move away. I can feel it through the bond, Darius pressed on. The part of you that still wants this. Still wants us. I said stop. Arya's hands were shaking now. Make me. The challenge hung between them like a gauntlet thrown down. Arya stared at him for a long moment, then moved with that fluid grace that was purely her own. She crossed to the bed and climbed onto it, kneeling just out of his reach. You want to know what I want, she asked, her voice husky. More than anything. I want to forget, she whispered. I want to stop hurting. I want to stop being angry every moment of every day. Her hand reached out, hovering just above his chest. I want to touch you and not feel like I'm betraying everything I've built. So touch me. I can't. But her hand moved closer, almost brushing against his skin. If I touch you, if I let myself feel this, it will destroy everything. All my plans, all my power, all the control I've fought to build. Maybe some things are worth destroying. Arya's eyes met his, and the longing in them made his chest ache. You don't understand. I can't be vulnerable. Not to you, not to anyone. I've been taking Wolfsbane for 3 years to suppress my heats because I refuse to be at the mercy of biology again. The admission hit Darius like a punch to the gut. Wolfsbane was dangerous for any shifter, but for an Omega to take it long term. Arya, that could kill you. Better than the alternative. Her voice was fierce. I won't be weak. I won't be helpless. I won't let any alpha ever have that kind of power over me again. It wouldn't be power over you, Darius said urgently. It would be sharing power. Together. You don't know what you're asking. Then show me. They stared at each other, the mate bond crackling between them like lightning about to strike. Arya's hand was still hovering over his chest, so close he could feel the heat of her skin. One touch, she whispered. Just to see if. Her palm pressed against his chest, and the world exploded. The mate bond, already strained and twisted by years of separation and pain, flared to life with an intensity that left them both gasping. Darius felt everything she felt, the longing she'd tried to bury, the love she'd tried to kill, the desperate need she'd been denying for 3 years. And she felt him, his regret, his love, his absolute determination to never let her go again. Arya, he breathed, and she leaned closer, her lips barely an inch from his. I can't, she whispered, but she didn't pull away. You can. His voice was rough with need. Just let go. Let yourself feel this. For a moment, he thought she would. Her lips brushed against his, soft and tentative, and the mate bonds sang with joy. But then she jerked back as if burned, her hand flying away from his chest. No. She scrambled off the bed, putting distance between them. No, I won't do this. I won't let you destroy me again. Arya, please. No. Her voice carried supernatural authority, and even Darius's wolf submitted to it. You had your chance. You made your choice. And now I've made mine. She was breathing hard, her composure completely shattered. I'm going to complete the ritual. I'm going to awaken the full power of the Luna Wolf bloodline. And then I'm going to rule every pack in existence. Her eyes blazed with silver fire. And you're going to watch from your chains as I become everything you were too afraid to let me be. Before Darius could respond, the sound of marching feet echoed from outside. Arya moved to the window, her body going tense. What is it? Darius asked. Your army, she said, her voice oddly flat. Marcus has come to rescue you. Relief flooded through Darius despite everything. My pack is walking into a trap, Arya finished. She turned from the window, and her expression was unreadable. Did you really think I wouldn't plan for this contingency? The marching grew louder, accompanied by the howls of wolves preparing for battle. But there was something wrong with the sound, something that made Darius's blood run cold. Arya, he said slowly. How did Marcus know where to find me? She was quiet for a long moment, then smiled that sharp, dangerous smile he was beginning to hate. Because he's been working with us all along. The words hit Darius like a physical blow. What? Marcus has been feeding Kane information about your pack's movements for over 2 years, Arya said, her voice almost gentle. How do you think we knew about your patrol routes? Your trade agreements? Your weaknesses? Darius felt the world tilt beneath him. Marcus, his beta, his friend, the man he'd trusted with his life and his pack, had been betraying him for years. Why? The word came out as barely a whisper. Arya moved closer to the bed, close enough that he could see the satisfaction in her eyes. Because this was never just about you and me, Darius. This was about destroying everything you and your father built. Every alliance, every treaty, every bond of loyalty. She leaned down, her face inches from his. Marcus was the first domino to fall. But he won't be the last. The sounds of battle erupted outside, wolves howling, metal clashing against metal, the screams of the wounded and dying. But Darius barely heard it over the roaring in his ears. You've been planning this for 3 years, he said numbly. Longer than that, Arya admitted. I started recruiting Marcus while your father was still alive. He was easy, ambitious, overlooked, convinced he deserved more than he was getting. She straightened, smoothing down her tunic. The others took more time, but betrayal is surprisingly simple once you understand what people really want. Darius stared at her, seeing her clearly for the first time. Not the broken girl he'd rejected. Not the powerful Luna wolf seeking revenge. But something infinitely more dangerous, a strategist who had spent years weaving a web of destruction around everything he cared about. How many, he asked. How many what? How many of my people have you turned? Arya's smile was sharp as winter wind. More than you think. Fewer than you fear. She moved toward the door. I'll let you wonder about the specifics. It'll give you something to think about while you listen to your army die. As she reached for the door handle, Darius called out, This won't bring you peace, Arya. All this power, all this revenge, it won't heal what was broken between us. She paused, her hand on the door. No, she said softly. But it will make sure you can never break anyone else the way you broke me. And with that, she was gone, leaving Darius alone with the sounds of battle and the devastating knowledge that his mate's revenge was far more complete than he'd ever imagined. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. Chapter 4. The Crimson Moon Kingdom had never been quieter. Darius Blackthorn stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his study, watching the empty courtyards below with eyes that held no warmth. 3 days had passed since his escape from Shadow Moon territory, since he'd learned that his most trusted friend had been selling his secrets for years, since Arya had made it clear that her hatred ran deeper than any ocean. His reflection in the glass looked like a stranger. Hollow cheeks, dark circles under lifeless eyes, and a pallor that spoke of something dying from the inside out. His wolf, Fenris, hadn't stirred in his consciousness since their return. The incomplete mate bond was killing them both, one breath at a time. Your Majesty. A hesitant voice came from behind him. Darius didn't turn to acknowledge whoever had dared to disturb him. Report, he said flatly. The Eastern Patrol found signs of Shadow Moon scouts near the river crossing, came the nervous reply. Darius recognized the voice now, Thomas, one of his younger warriors who'd been promoted to fill the gaps left by Marcus's treachery. They request permission to engage. Denied. Sir. You heard me. Darius finally turned, and Thomas took an involuntary step backward at the sight of his Alpha King's face. There was nothing there, no anger, no determination, no fire. Just empty coldness. Pull all patrols back to the inner perimeter. But Your Majesty, that will leave our borders completely exposed. I'm aware. Darius moved to his desk, where stacks of reports lay unread. Letters from allied pacts requesting assistance, trade agreements requiring his signature, urgent matters of state that once would have demanded his immediate attention. Now they were just paper. Is there anything else? Thomas hesitated, clearly wanting to argue, but the supernatural pressure of Darius's alpha presence, cold and distant as winter death, made dissent impossible. No, Your Majesty. After the warrior left, Darius sank into his chair and stared at the map spread across his desk. Red pins marked Shadow Moon positions, closing in like a noose around his territory. Blue pins showed his own forces, pitifully few now that he'd recalled everyone to the castle. In a week, maybe 2, Arya would have everything she'd worked for. He found he didn't care. The mate bond pulsed weakly in his chest, a constant reminder of what he'd lost. Not just Arya, though her rejection had torn something fundamental from his soul. But Marcus too, the friend who'd stood beside him through every challenge, who'd helped him become the leader his father never was, who'd been selling him out since before his father's death. Every memory was tainted now. Every moment of trust, every shared victory, every time Marcus had offered counsel or comfort, all of it lies. The betrayal was so complete, so perfectly executed, that Darius found himself questioning everything. Every friendship, every alliance, every person who'd ever claimed loyalty to him. Trust was a luxury he could no longer afford. But without trust, a pack couldn't function. And so the Crimson Moon Kingdom was dying along with its king. A soft knock interrupted his brooding. "Enter," he called without enthusiasm. Elder Grace stepped into the study, her aged face creased with worry. She was one of the few pack members who'd been with them since his grandfather's time, too old and respected for even Darius to dismiss. "You look terrible," she said without preamble. "Thank you for that astute observation." Grace moved closer, her sharp eyes taking in his appearance. "When did you last eat? Sleep? Shift?" "I don't remember." It was the truth. The past 3 days had blurred together in a haze of emptiness. "This has to stop, Darius." Grace's voice carried the authority of someone who'd helped raise him. "Your pack is looking to you for leadership, and instead they're watching their alpha king waste away like a lovesick pup." "My pack," Darius laughed, but there was no humor in it. "How many more of them do you think are working for Shadow Moon? 10%? 50? Maybe you're one of them too, Grace. Maybe this conversation is just another way to gather intelligence." Grace's face softened with something that might have been pity. "Oh, child. What has she done to you?" "She's shown me the truth." Darius stood abruptly, moving back to the window. "I was weak. Blind. I trusted when I should have been suspicious, loved when I should have been calculating. Now my pack will pay the price for my failures." "And what about her price?" Grace asked quietly. "What do you mean?" "I've been getting reports from our remaining border scouts. Shadow Moon is massing for a final assault, but something's wrong with their Luna." Grace joined him at the window. "She's been seen pacing the borders at night, alone, staring toward our territory. Some say she looks as haunted as you do." Darius felt something flicker in his chest, hope, maybe, or just wishful thinking. "Arya made her choice. Did she? Or is she just as trapped by this mess as you are?" Before Darius could respond, the sound of howling echoed across the courtyard. Not the celebratory howls of returning hunters, but the desperate warning calls of wolves under attack. "They're here," Darius said, his voice eerily calm. Grace gripped his arm. "Darius, you have to fight. If not for yourself, then for the innocent wolves who still believe in you." He looked down at her weathered hand on his sleeve, and for a moment, a shadow of his old self flickered in his eyes. "Ready the defenses," he said quietly. "And Grace? If I don't survive this, you will. If I don't," he continued firmly, "make sure the non-combatants reach the mountain caves. There are supply caches there that will last months if needed." Grace squeezed his arm once more, then hurried from the room to carry out his orders. Darius remained at the window, watching as his warriors scrambled to defensive positions. In the distance, he could see shadows moving through the forest, hundreds of them, flowing like a dark tide toward his home. And somewhere among them was Arya. The battle began at sunset, painting the sky the color of blood and fire. Darius fought like a man with nothing left to lose, which was exactly what he was. His sword cut through Shadow Moon warriors with mechanical precision, but there was no passion in it, no fire. He was going through the motions of war while his soul had already surrendered. The Crimson Moon defenses, undermined by years of Marcus's sabotage, crumbled faster than expected. Warriors who should have been in position were elsewhere. Supply lines that should have been secure had been compromised. Every tactical advantage Darius might have had was gone before the battle even began. Within hours, Shadow Moon forces had breached the outer walls and were fighting in the courtyard itself. Darius found himself backed against the steps of the Great Hall, surrounded by enemy wolves, his own forces scattered or dead. That's when he saw her. Arya emerged from the chaos like an avenging angel, her silver hair flowing behind her as she moved with supernatural grace through the battle. She'd traded her elegant gowns for battle leathers, and power radiated from her in waves that made even her own allies give her a wide berth. Their eyes met across the battlefield, and everything else seemed to fade away. She approached him slowly, her violet eyes unreadable. The fighting around them had quieted, as if every wolf present sensed the significance of this moment. "Surrender," she said when she was close enough to speak without shouting. "No." Arya tilted her head, studying his face. "Your forces are broken. Your kingdom is lost. There's no shame in yielding to save the lives of your remaining people." "I said no." Darius straightened, raising his sword despite the exhaustion weighing down his limbs. "If you want this crown, you'll have to take it from my corpse." For a moment, something flickered in her expression, pain, maybe, or regret. But it was gone so quickly he might have imagined it. "So be it," she said, drawing her own blade. They circled each other warily, and Darius couldn't help but notice how much she'd changed. The girl he'd once known had been graceful but untrained in combat. This woman moved like a born warrior, every step calculated and precise. "You're not going to ask me why," she said as they tested each other's defenses with careful strikes. "I know why." Darius parried her attack and countered with one of his own. "I hurt you. Rejected you. Humiliated you. This is justice." "Is it?" Arya's blade locked against his, bringing them close enough that he could see the conflict in her eyes. "Or is it just another kind of destruction?" They broke apart, both breathing hard. Around them, the battle had stopped entirely as wolves from both packs watched their leaders fight for supremacy. "You want to know something?" Darius said, lowering his sword slightly. "I'm glad it's you." Arya hesitated, her blade wavering. "What?" "If I have to die, if my kingdom has to fall, I'm glad it's you who brings me down." He dropped his sword entirely, and gasps echoed from the watching wolves. "You deserved better than what I gave you. You deserved love, respect, protection. Instead, I gave you pain." He met her eyes steadily. "So take your revenge, Arya. I won't fight you anymore." Arya stared at him, her sword still raised but trembling in her grip. "Pick up your weapon." "No." "Pick it up." The command carried supernatural force, but Darius didn't move. "I'm tired, Arya." His voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm tired of fighting, tired of pretending I can fix what I broke, tired of watching everything I touch turn to ash." He spread his arms wide, exposing his chest to her blade. "If my death brings you peace, then I give it gladly." For a long moment, they stood frozen like that, Arya with her sword raised, Darius with his arms spread in surrender. The mate bond pulsed between them, carrying emotions too complex to name. Then something shifted in Arya's expression. The cold mask she'd worn for 3 years cracked, revealing the pain underneath. "You don't get to do this," she whispered. "You don't get to take the easy way out." "It's not easy," Darius said softly. "Living without you has been the hardest thing I've ever done. Dying will be a mercy." Arya's sword clattered to the ground as her hands flew to her chest, right over her heart. She gasped, stumbling backward as if struck. "What's happening to me?" she whispered. Darius stepped toward her, concern overriding everything else. "Arya? I can't breathe." She was hyperventilating now, her eyes wide with panic. "Something's wrong. The bond, it feels like it's tearing." Understanding hit Darius like a physical blow. "Your Luna wolf instincts," he breathed. "They're trying to protect me." "That's impossible. I rejected you." I chose revenge. You can reject me with your mind, Darius said, moving closer despite the sword still pointed at him from all directions. But you can't reject what you are. And what you are is a Luna wolf whose true mate just offered to die. Arya was shaking now, her supernatural composure completely shattered. I hate you. I hate what you did to me, what you made me become. I know. I've spent 3 years planning your destruction. I know. I want to watch your kingdom burn. I know. Darius reached out slowly, his fingers barely brushing her cheek. But you also want to save me. And that's tearing you apart. Arya leaned into his touch for just a moment before jerking away. No. No, I won't let you do this to me again. I won't be weak. Protecting your mate isn't weakness, Darius said gently. It's nature. You're not my mate. The words came out as a roar that echoed across the battlefield. You rejected me. You chose your pride over our bond. Yes, Darius said simply. And I'll regret it until the day I die. But that doesn't change what we are to each other. Arya spun away from him, her hands pressed to her temples. Raven, she called out. End this. Kill him now. Raven stepped forward from the crowd of Shadow Moon warriors, his face grim with satisfaction. Finally. I was beginning to think you'd lost your nerve, Luna. He raised his sword toward Darius, but Arya's hand shot out to stop him. Wait. What now? Raven's patience was clearly wearing thin. I need a moment. Arya's voice was strained. To say goodbye. To close this chapter properly. Raven's eyes narrowed. Make it quick. We have a schedule to keep. Arya nodded, then gestured for Darius to follow her toward the steps of the Great Hall, away from the listening ears of their armies. What schedule? Darius asked quietly when they were out of earshot. Arya's face had gone pale. The ritual. The one I told you about, to awaken the full power of the Luna Wolf bloodline. What about it? It has to be performed during the eclipse tomorrow night. At the ancient temple in the Whispering Woods. She looked at him with something that might have been fear. Raven's been pushing for it, insisting we can't wait. And I just realized something. Arya's voice dropped to a whisper. The ritual I've been planning, the one I learned from the ancient texts, it's not what Raven described to Cain. Darius frowned. What do you mean? The version Raven showed Cain requires the willing sacrifice of all nearby Alpha Kings. Their power gets absorbed into the Luna Wolf performing the ritual. Arya's hands were shaking again. But the version I found in the original texts, it requires the willing sacrifice of the Luna Wolf herself. Understanding crashed over Darius like a cold wave. He's been lying to you. Not just lying. Arya's eyes were wide with growing horror. Using me. The ritual he wants to perform won't make me more powerful. It will drain my abilities and transfer them to him. She laughed bitterly. I thought I was playing everyone else, but I was the one being played. Arya. Darius reached for her, but she stepped back. He's been planning this for years. Longer than my revenge plot. He found me when I was broken and desperate, offered me power and purpose, and I never questioned why. She pressed her hands to her face. I'm such a fool. You're not a fool. You're a survivor who was manipulated by someone with more experience at deception. It doesn't matter now. Arya straightened, her mask sliding back into place. I made my choices. I have to live with the consequences. Or, Darius said carefully, you could make a different choice. Arya stared at him for a long moment, hope and fear warring in her expression. Even if I wanted to, it's too late. Raven has an army. Cain believes in his vision of conquest. And my people. She gestured toward the Shadow Moon wolves watching them. They followed me here expecting victory. Then give them a different kind of victory, Darius suggested. Truth instead of lies. Justice instead of revenge. Before Arya could respond, Raven's voice cut across the courtyard. Enough talking. Luna, if you can't finish this, I will. Arya closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them, they blazed with silver fire. Actually, Raven, she called back, her voice carrying supernatural authority. I think it's time you told us the truth about tomorrow night's ritual. Raven went very still. I don't know what you mean. Don't you? Arya began walking toward him, power radiating from her in waves. Tell Cain about the part of the ritual you didn't mention. The part where the Luna wolf dies and transfers her power to the nearest male wolf. The effect of her words on the Shadow Moon army was immediate. Wolves began looking between their leaders with confusion and growing anger. Cain himself stepped forward, his face dark with suspicion. Is this true? Cain demanded. Raven's composure finally cracked. The ritual requires sacrifice, yes. But the cause is greater than any individual. Whose sacrifice? Cain's voice was deadly quiet. The Luna wolf's power was never meant to be wielded by a female, Raven said desperately. The ancient texts are clear. Male wolves are stronger, more suited to leadership. The ritual simply corrects nature's mistake. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Cain's roar of rage echoed across the battlefield. You've been planning to kill our Luna? Cain's eyes blazed with fury. The most powerful wolf born in 3 centuries, and you wanted to sacrifice her for your own ambition? For the good of all packs. Raven protested. Under my leadership. Cain shifted to his massive gray wolf form and lunged. Raven barely had time to draw his sword before 200 pounds of furious alpha slammed into him. As chaos erupted around them, Darius caught Arya's arm. We need to get out of here. No. Arya watched the battle between Cain and Raven with grim satisfaction. This is exactly what needs to happen. Let them tear each other apart. And then what? You still have an army of wolves who came here for conquest. Arya was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. You're right. This won't end with Raven's death. She looked at Darius, and for the first time in 3 years, he saw uncertainty in her eyes. I don't know how to fix this. We'll figure it out, Darius said. Together. Together? Arya's laugh was bitter. After everything I've done? After the people I've killed, the kingdom I've destroyed? Yes, Darius said simply. Together. As Cain's howl of victory announced Raven's death, Arya stared at Darius with an expression he couldn't read. Around them, 2 armies stood in confusion, their leaders dead or compromised, their purpose suddenly unclear. The ritual site, Arya said suddenly. We have to get there first. Why? Because Raven wasn't working alone. He had followers who believed in his vision, and they'll try to complete the ritual with or without him. Arya's eyes blazed with determination. If they succeed in awakening that ancient power, it won't matter who wins this battle. Every pack in existence will be enslaved. Darius felt something stir in his chest for the first time in days. Purpose. Then we stop them. We? Arya looked at him with surprise. You said it yourself, this is bigger than our personal war. If there's a chance to save both our packs, to prevent some ancient evil from destroying everything. Darius straightened, and for a moment, he looked like the king he used to be. Then yes. We. Arya stared at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. The Whispering Woods Temple. Tomorrow night at the eclipse. I'll be there. This doesn't mean I forgive you, Arya said quickly. Or that thing's between us. I know, Darius said softly. But maybe it's a start. As they separated to deal with their respective armies, neither of them noticed the figure watching from the shadows, one of Raven's followers, his eyes glowing with fanatic devotion, already planning to ensure his master's vision survived his death. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. Chapter 5. The dungeons beneath Crimson Moon Castle had held many prisoners over the centuries, but never its own king. Darius sat on the cold stone floor of the cell where his own council had placed him for his protection after the battle. His wounds had healed, but the hollow ache in his chest remained. Through the narrow window high above, he could see the first hints of dusk painting the sky purple and gold. The eclipse would begin soon. Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside, too light to belong to any of his guards. Darius didn't bother looking up until the familiar scent of vanilla and wild jasmine reached him. "Hello, Darius." Arya stood before his cell, no longer in battle leathers but in a simple dark dress that made her silver hair seem to glow in the torchlight. She held a set of keys in her hand, and her violet eyes were filled with something he'd almost forgotten existed, uncertainty. "Come to gloat?" he asked, though his voice held no anger. "Come to get you out." She unlocked the cell door and stepped inside. "We have a ritual to stop." Darius finally looked at her fully, and what he saw made his breath catch. Gone was the mask of cold power she'd worn for 3 years. Instead, she looked vulnerable, almost fragile, like the girl he'd once known. "Why?" he asked. Arya was quiet for a moment, then sank down onto the stone floor beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Because I've been lying to myself for 3 years, and I'm tired of it." "About what?" "About everything." She stared at her hands, clasped tightly in her lap. "About hating you. About wanting revenge. About being strong enough to do this alone." She laughed, but it sounded broken. "I told myself that what I felt for you was just the mate bond, just biology forcing unwanted feelings. But that was a lie too." Darius felt something stir in his chest, not hope, exactly, but something close to it. "Arya. I need to tell you the truth," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "All of it. Starting with why I really left 3 years ago." "You left because I rejected you." "No." Arya finally looked at him, and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I left because I was falling apart, and I couldn't let you see it happen." Darius frowned. "What do you mean?" "The night you rejected me, when I walked away from that ceremony. I made it exactly 50 feet before I collapsed." Arya's voice grew smaller. "The incomplete bond, the Luna Wolf abilities I'd been suppressing for years, the wolfsbane I'd been taking to hide my heats, it all caught up with me at once. You never said. Cain found me seizing in the forest, barely conscious, bleeding from forcing too many transformations." Arya wrapped her arms around herself. "I was dying, Darius. Literally dying from trying to be something I wasn't." The revelation hit Darius like a physical blow. "Why didn't you come to me? I could have helped." "Could you?" Arya met his eyes steadily. 3 years ago, if I'd shown up at your door broken and desperate, would you have chosen me over your kingdom's stability? Over your reputation?" Darius opened his mouth to say yes, then stopped. 3 years ago, he'd been young, arrogant, terrified of appearing weak. And Arya was right, he probably would have seen her vulnerability as confirmation that he'd made the right choice in rejecting her. "I was a coward," he said finally. "You were young. We both were." Arya's voice grew stronger. "Cain saved my life, but the price was everything I used to be. He made me strong, powerful, feared, but he also made me empty. I spent 3 years learning to control others while losing control of myself." She stood abruptly, pacing to the small window. "I thought I wanted revenge, but what I really wanted was for you to see me. To acknowledge that I was worth something. That I mattered." "You've always mattered," Darius said softly. "Have I?" Arya spun to face him. "Then why, in 3 years of reports about your kingdom, was there never any mention of looking for me? Of wondering if I was alive or dead?" The question hung between them like a blade. Darius had no good answer because there wasn't one. He'd told himself he was respecting her choice to leave, but the truth was simpler and more painful. He'd been relieved not to deal with the guilt of what he'd done. Because I'm a selfish bastard who was more concerned with his own pain than yours, he said finally. Arya stared at him, clearly not expecting such brutal honesty. Darius. You want the truth? Here it is. Darius stood, moving closer to her. I didn't look for you because I was terrified of what I'd find. Terrified that you'd moved on, found someone who deserved you, built a life that didn't include me. He laughed bitterly. I was so focused on protecting my own heart that I never considered yours might be breaking too. Tears were sliding down Arya's cheeks now, but she didn't try to hide them. I waited, she whispered. For months, I waited for some sign that you regretted your choice. A letter, a message, anything. I wrote 1,000 letters, Darius admitted. Never sent a single one because I didn't think I had the right to ask for forgiveness. They stood there in the dim cell, 3 years of pain and misunderstanding stretched between them like a chasm. Then Arya took a step forward, closing some of the distance. We're both idiots, she said, her voice thick with tears. Complete idiots, Darius agreed. Raven played us perfectly. Used our pride and pain against us. Made us too focused on hurting each other to see the real threat. Arya reached out tentatively, her fingers barely brushing his hand. The touch sent electricity shooting through both of them, the mate bond flaring to life with renewed intensity. Can you forgive me, she whispered. For the kingdom I've destroyed, the people I've hurt, the years I've wasted on hatred? Can you forgive me? Darius countered, turning his hand to catch her fingers. For the girl I broke, the trust one betrayed, the mate I abandoned when you needed me most? Instead of answering with words, Arya stepped into his arms. The embrace was desperate, full of 3 years of longing and regret, and when their lips met, the mate bonds sang with joy. For a moment, they were just two people who'd found their way back to each other despite impossible odds. Then reality intruded in the form of distant howling, wolves gathering for the eclipse ritual. We have to go, Arya said against his lips. Together, Darius said firmly. Together, she agreed. They left the dungeons hand in hand, and if anyone saw the king and the enemy Luna walking freely through the castle, they were wise enough not to interfere. The Whispering Woods lived up to their name, filled with sounds that weren't quite wind and weren't quite voices. Ancient trees towered overhead, their branches so thick they blocked out most of the moonlight. Arya led the way through paths that seemed to shift when no one was looking, following instincts that were part Luna wolf gift and part childhood memory. I used to play here as a child, she said softly as they navigated around a massive fallen log. Before I knew what I was, before I learned to be afraid. What was it like? Darius asked. Before you had to hide? Arya was quiet for a moment, considering. Free, she said finally. I could shift without thinking about it, run with the wind, feel connected to every living thing in the forest. Her voice grew sad. I haven't felt that way since I was 12 years old. Maybe you will again, Darius suggested. After tonight. Maybe. But Arya didn't sound convinced. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, their hands still linked, following the growing sound of chanting voices. The eclipse was reaching totality now, casting everything in an eerie silver light that made the shadows dance like living things. Finally, they reached the edge of a circular clearing dominated by a massive stone temple. The structure was older than memory, carved with symbols that seemed to writhe and shift in the eclipse light. Dozens of wolves surrounded it, some in human form, others shifted, all focused on the figure standing atop the temple steps. Not Raven, he was dead. But someone else, a wolf Darius didn't recognize, wearing robes covered in the same ancient symbols that decorated the temple. Matthias, Arya breathed. Raven's apprentice. You know him? He was the one who found the original ritual texts. Raven's most devoted follower. Arya's grip on his hand tightened. If anyone would try to complete Raven's work, it would be him. They watched from the tree line as Matthias raised his arms to the eclipse moon, his voice carrying clearly across the clearing. Brothers and sisters. Tonight we reclaim the power that was stolen from us centuries ago. Tonight we restore the natural order. Cheers rose from the gathered wolves, and Darius felt his blood run cold as he recognized some of the voices. These weren't all Shadow Moon wolves, some of them were from other packs, even some from his own territory. "How many followers did Raven have?" he whispered. "More than I realized," Arya replied grimly. He'd been recruiting for years, promising power to wolves who felt overlooked or oppressed by their alphas. Matthias continued his speech, his voice growing more fervent. "The Luna wolf power was never meant to be wielded by a female. It corrupts the natural hierarchy, makes the weak think they can rule the strong." He gestured toward a stone altar at the center of the temple, where silver chains lay waiting. "But tonight, we correct that mistake. Tonight, we claim the power for those who deserve it." "They're still planning to sacrifice you," Darius realized. "Or any Luna wolf they can get their hands on." Arya's eyes were grim. "The ritual doesn't specifically require me, just someone with the bloodline. Then we make sure they don't get anyone." They were preparing to move when a familiar voice rang out across the clearing. "Actually, I think you'll find the ritual requires something quite different." Cain Darkwood stepped into the temple circle, flanked by a dozen Shadow Moon warriors. But instead of supporting Matthias, they had their weapons drawn and pointed at the gathered cultists. "Alpha Cain," Matthias called out, relief clear in his voice. "Perfect timing. We're ready to begin the ritual." "I'm sure you are," Cain replied smoothly. "But first, let me share something interesting I learned while going through Raven's private papers." Cain pulled out a scroll covered in ancient text. "This is the original ritual, not the version Raven showed us. And it says something fascinating." Matthias's confidence began to waver. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Cain's voice carried deadly authority, "that Raven lied to all of us. The ritual doesn't transfer Luna wolf power to a male wolf. It destroys the Luna wolf bloodline entirely, leaving a power vacuum that any strong alpha can fill." Gasps and angry murmurs rose from the gathered wolves. Several of them began backing away from the temple, clearly having second thoughts about their participation. "That's impossible," Matthias protested. "Master Raven would never." Master Raven was a fanatic who saw Luna wolves as an abomination to be eliminated, Cain continued. "He used your loyalty to further his own twisted agenda. And now you're about to complete his work by destroying the rarest and most precious gift our species has ever known." In the confusion that followed, Arya and Darius moved closer to the temple. But they weren't the only ones. Other figures were emerging from the forest, and Darius's heart sank as he recognized Marcus among them. His former beta wasn't alone. He'd brought at least 20 wolves with him, all wearing the silver armbands that marked them as Raven's inner circle. "Enough!" Marcus roared, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Cain, you've been weak from the beginning, letting sentiment cloud your judgment. Matthias, you're a fool who doesn't understand the forces you're playing with." His cold eyes found Arya and Darius at the edge of the clearing. "And you too, you're both exactly where you need to be." "Marcus," Darius stepped forward, his voice heavy with disappointment. "Why? Why?" Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Because your father killed my brother, and I swore an oath on his grave that I'd see the Blackthorn line ended." The revelation hit Darius like a physical blow. "Your brother? Thomas Ironwood. One of the Luna wolves your father hunted down and murdered." Marcus's eyes blazed with old hatred. "I've spent 15 years planning this moment, Darius. 15 years earning your trust, learning your weaknesses, positioning myself to destroy everything you hold dear." "So you worked with Raven." "I used Raven, just like he used everyone else." Marcus gestured to his followers, who began surrounding the temple. "But where he was content to simply eliminate Luna wolves, I wanted something more, poetic." Understanding dawned on Darius's face. "You wanted me to watch her die. I wanted you to suffer the way my family suffered. To lose the person who mattered most to you while being powerless to stop it." Marcus smiled coldly. "But this is even better. Now I get to kill you both." The battle erupted without warning. Marcus's wolves attacked Cain's forces while Matthias's cultists scattered in all directions. In the chaos, Darius lost track of Arya until he heard her scream. She was on the temple steps, fighting desperately against 3 of Marcus's wolves who were trying to drag her toward the altar. The silver chains were already glowing with accumulated moonlight, ready to bind any Luna wolf placed upon them. Darius fought his way through the melee, taking down anyone who stood between him and his mate. But there were too many of them, and Marcus was directing his forces with tactical precision born of years of studying Darius's fighting style. Arya. Darius called out as he saw her stumble, one of her attackers' claws having found their mark. "I'm fine," she called back, but he could smell her blood on the wind. That's when Marcus made his move. The former Beta appeared behind Darius like a shadow, a silver blade gleaming in his hand. "Just like your father," Marcus whispered as he struck. The blade slid between Darius's ribs, angled upward toward his heart. Silver fire burned through his veins as Marcus twisted the knife. "No!" Arya's scream was filled with supernatural power that made every wolf in the clearing stumble. Power erupted from her like a tidal wave, the incomplete mate bond amplifying her Luna wolf abilities beyond anything she'd ever achieved. The 3 wolves attacking her simply stopped, their wills completely overridden by her command. But the effort cost her. She collapsed to her knees on the temple steps, her skin pale and her breathing labored. "Interesting," Marcus said, still holding the silver blade in Darius's chest. "But not enough to save either of you." Darius could feel his strength ebbing as the silver poisoned his system. But he could also feel something else, the mate bond pulling tight between him and Arya, carrying not just love but power. "Marcus," he said through gritted teeth. "You made one mistake." "Oh? What's that?" "You assumed I'd fight you alone." Darius reached for Arya through the mate bond, not to take her power but to share his own strength with her. The connection flared to life like lightning, and suddenly they weren't 2 separate wolves fighting individual battles. They were one. Arya rose from the temple steps with grace that was purely supernatural, her eyes blazing with silver fire. But this time, the power wasn't just hers, it was theirs, combined and amplified through the bond they'd finally stopped fighting. "Get away from my mate," she said, her voice carrying the authority of every Luna wolf who'd ever lived. Marcus tried to fight the compulsion, but it was like trying to stop the tide. His hand opened against his will, releasing the silver blade. His body turned toward Arya, his wolf completely submitting to her dominance. "How?" he whispered. "Love," Arya said simply. "Something you never understood." She gestured, and Marcus collapsed, not dead but unconscious, his followers falling around him like dominoes. Across the clearing, Matthias and his cultists were fleeing into the forest, their resolve broken by the display of true Luna wolf power. In the sudden silence, Arya rushed to Darius's side. The silver blade had done damage, but with their bond completed, his healing factor was already working to repair it. "Are you all right?" she asked, her hands hovering over his wound. "I am now," he said, catching her hands in his. "Arya, what we just did." "I know." Her smile was radiant. "I can feel everything you feel. Your love, your strength, your absolute determination to protect our people." "Our people?" "Shadow Moon, Crimson Moon, they're all just wolves trying to survive in a dangerous world." Arya looked around the clearing, where Cain was organizing the remnants of both their armies. "Maybe it's time to stop thinking in terms of separate packs." Darius followed her gaze, seeing the possibilities she did. A united territory, ruled not through fear or dominance but through the kind of strength that came from working together. "It won't be easy," he warned. "There will be resistance, old grudges to overcome. Then we'll overcome them." Arya leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. Together. As the eclipse began to fade and normal moonlight returned to the forest, Darius felt something he hadn't experienced in years: hope. Not just for their personal future, but for the future of every wolf under their protection. The mate bond hummed between them, no longer a source of pain but a foundation for everything they would build together. Epilogue: New Beginnings. 6 months later. Arya stood on the balcony of what had once been the Crimson Moon Castle and was now the heart of the United Territories, watching the sun rise over lands that had known peace for the first time in generations. Her hand rested on her still flat stomach, but she could already sense the changes beginning within her. Twins. The revelation had come to her in dreams filled with ancient voices and prophecies she didn't fully understand. Luna wolf offspring born from a true mate bond, the voices whispered, would be the most powerful werewolves in history. Penny for your thoughts. Darius's voice came from behind her, followed by the warmth of his arms wrapping around her waist. Just thinking about the future, she said, leaning back against his chest. And whether we're ready for what's coming. The babies? Among other things. Arya turned in his arms, studying his face. The hollow, broken man she'd found in that dungeon was gone, replaced by someone stronger than he'd ever been. There are rumors from the Eastern Territories. Wolves who serve something older and darker than any pack. Let them come, Darius said simply. Whatever threats we face, we'll face them together. With our children. With our children, he agreed, his hand joining hers on her stomach. Though I have to admit, the idea of twin Luna wolves is both thrilling and terrifying. Arya laughed, the sound carrying joy instead of the bitterness that had characterized her laughter for years. They'll be protected. Loved. They'll never have to hide what they are or be afraid of their own power. No, Darius agreed, pressing a kiss to her forehead. They'll be raised to understand that true strength comes not from dominating others, but from protecting those who can't protect themselves. As they stood together watching the sunrise, neither of them noticed the figure watching from the distant tree-line. Ancient eyes studied the castle with calculating interest, drawn by the scent of power unlike anything that had walked the earth in centuries. Change was coming to the werewolf world, and not everyone would welcome it. But for now, in this moment, there was peace. And love. And the promise of a future brighter than either of them had dared to dream. The mate bond pulsed between them, carrying not just their own emotions but the joy of their unborn children, already connected to the power that would one day reshape their world. Together, they were ready for whatever came next. Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe, like and share this video to continue listening to this type of story daily and also, to appreciate this community too. I would like to hear your wonderful opinion about this story. Please comment below.